Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I decided to do the Bookternet All Stars Charity Challenge tag. I've seen this tag on Jean's Bookish Thoughts channel and I decided I'm gonna do it because it's so much fun. It is a bookish community challenge through which we have fun because we talk about a lot of popular books on BookTube, but we also raise money for COVID-19 relief. So I'll put Jean's video down below together with the original creator of the tag and all the relevant information in case you want to donate money to COVID-19 relief. I think you can participate in this tag in a variety of different ways and it is open until the end of May. So let's just jump into it. And the first name on this list is an author I think everyone knows, and it is Angie Thomas. I think most of us have heard about Angie Thomas because most of us have heard about her book The Hate You Give. I think this is such a popular book and I think when this came out, I think BookTube kind of exploded and everyone was just raving about it, and it's just such an important book. We follow our main protagonist, who is a young girl, and she witnesses one of her friends being killed by a cop. I think Angie Thomas has another book out on the come up or something like that. It's to do with music. I heard about that. I don't know if I'm gonna pick it up. It wasn't just, I don't think it's so much for me, that one, but I'm really happy I read this one and I think I gave it 4 stars. It's not perfect, but I think everyone should read it because I think this is just one of those very important reads. The next book on this list is Shatter Me by Tahir, and I think if you have been on BookTube for a while, you probably heard about this. I think this is such a popular dystopian series book because it came out right around the time all these dystopian series came out, and I think it just rode that wave of popularity. I have just read or listened to the first of these, actually Shatter Me. I think I finished it like 3-4 days ago. I'm happy I read it because I was curious about it, because people still talk about this series and people still recommend this series. I just don't think this is really for me. I mean, it is about a young girl whose touch is lethal, so she's locked away in an asylum. So we start, the book starts out by meeting her where she's locked away, and we see the story to her perspective, so it's a first person narrative, and everything is just so over the top and dramatic, and there's these metaphors on top of metaphors on top of metaphors, so many, and they just don't make sense. I think they're kind of quirky at some point, and maybe that was the point. But I think there are just too many of them and they kind of took me out of the story. So I listened to it and every time and I had to chuckle several times because some of these were just like, what the hell? So I have some quotes from the book on Goodreads in front of me, and I'm just gonna read some for you. I think they're really funny. So let me see. Someone picked up the sun and pinned it to the sky again, but every day it hangs a little lower than the day before. It's like a negligent parent who only knows one half of who you are. It never sees how its absence changes people, how different we are in the dark. So I guess it's meant to be kind of like deep and to make you connect and feel a bit emotional, but some of these are just plain, I don't want to say anything bad about it, but I think it's just too much. Hope is a pocket of possibility. I'm holding it in my hand. Or I can shoot 100 numbers through the chest and watch them bleed decimal points in the palm of my hand. I can rip the numbers of a clock and watch the hour hand tick, 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 its final talk just before I fall asleep. I can suffocate seconds just by holding my breath. I've been murdering minutes for hours and no one seems to mind. I mean, this is meant for young adults, so I guess it makes sense. But just for me, it was funny, and I don't think it's meant to be funny. So I think why people are drawn to this series is also a love triangle. So yeah, there you go. The next on the list is Leigh Bardugo, and I think Leigh Bardugo is also very, very popular on BookTube. She is most known for her Grishaverse books, the Shadow and Bone trilogy, but also her Six of Crows duology. So I have read the Shadow and Bone trilogy and I thought it was okay. I really did not like the main character, Elena, and I didn't really understand the ending. So there you go. I think people have mixed feelings about this series, but overall people do enjoy this universe. And then I think people like much more her Six of Crows duology, and I read the Six of Crows, but I think I liked the Shadow and Bone trilogy better. I mean, I think Six of Crows, the duology, is overhyped, and I'm not sure I'm gonna read the second book in the duology, which is Crooked Kingdom. So I also attempted to read Leigh Bardugo's latest novel, which is for adults, Ninth House, and I DNF'd it. So I don't know if I'm gonna continue with this author, because it just seems like I don't really connect with her writing, her characters, her world that much. I think I primarily read her books because they were so popular, and I think I can probably say that for all these books and authors. This is just to show how much BookTube influences your reads. Especially I did this when I started watching BookTube, which is like, I think it was 14, 15, 16, mostly more. And that's where I read the most of these. So I'm not sure I would pick them up today so much. But then again, I just read Shadow Me. So at some point, I think I'm the type which caves and reads these popular books. The next book on this list is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and I have read this whole trilogy, the Cruel Prince trilogy, and I really enjoyed it. I think I look at it as a guilty pleasure escapist book for me because it's just so much fun, and I really like the romantic tension in it. It is a hate to love romance, and there's a lot of angst in it, and it's just so much fun. You really can immerse yourself and binge the whole series like in a weekend or so because it's just so fast-paced. Then we have The Bone Witch, and I think this is the only one I haven't heard of, even though it's on this list, so it must be really popular. So I don't know when this actually came out and how come I haven't heard about it, but I am slowly reading books about witches because I really like to read about them. So this is called The Bone Witch, so I think I should put it on my TBR. Let me know if you have read it and what you thought about it. The next author on this list is Victoria Schwab, and I have read her book, the first one in a series called The Savage Song. She writes under different pen names, and I think all Victoria Schwab are her young adult books, and I think V.E. Schwab are her adult books. I think her most popular series is an adult fantasy, if I'm not mistaken, and it is one where there are different Londons, different colored Londons, red, black, white, something like that, and the man can go through all these kind of different Londons. I have to admit, I haven't really attempted to read that one because I read This Savage Song and it was just not for me. It is some sort of a superhero type of setting, dystopian world where people, when you do a crime, it creates monsters. So the worse the crime, the worse the monster, something like that. And then we follow two characters. One of them is a monster, and the other one is the daughter of one of these powerful figures in this world. I don't think this fantasy concept was so interesting for me. It felt like a dark comic book, so that's really not for me. But I think a lot of people enjoy and love her books, but I just have to say it's not for me. I'm happy I gave her a try, and maybe at some point in the future I'll try her adult fantasy series, the one with the Londons, but not anytime soon. The next series on this list is the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I have read the first 2 books in this series a long time ago. This was again not one that I really enjoyed that much. These are sci-fi fairy tale retellings, and the main focus is on the romance, I would say. So I think these are really well loved, and I understand why people like it, but for me it was I think the writing felt too simplistic, and the characters not so well developed, I feel. So I really did not connect to them as much. I did find the concept for the first books in the really interesting. The next author on this list is Adam Silvera, and I think he writes mostly contemporaries, or I think he also wrote some sort of dystopian love story which takes place in a day. He's not on my radar at all, and his books just don't seem to connect with me, and the premises don't seem to interest me, so I have not read anything by him. Then we have Cassandra Clare, and she wrote the Shadowhunter series, which I think I have tried to watch the adaptation of, and I just did not enjoy as much. So I think when she was so popular, I was not so much on BookTube or watching BookTube, so I completely missed that period where everyone was so hyped about her books. And at this point, there's so many books out there in that series that it just feels too much to just even attempt to read them. So I think I'll just pass on this. Now we come to a completely different genre, which is historical fiction, and it is quite a recent book, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And this one is also one of those which blew up the bookish community. I think a lot of people enjoy this. I think this is one of those poolside summer reads. It's a fast-paced, and it has a main female protagonist, and she tells her life. She had a really interesting life. She was an actress in Hollywood, and she had 7 husbands. So I think this is one of those a lot of people enjoy because it is about a famous person, an actress, even though fictional. And I think in general, books about famous people are pretty well received, because her other book, the author's other book, Daisy Jones and the Six, is also pretty popular and well known. So I've read both of these books, and I just don't get the hype. So in my opinion, these are overhyped, but I can see why people love them. Then we come to Lena Taylor, and she's also quite popular for 2 series, I believe. I have read the first book in her Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, which is a fantasy series which takes place in the real world but also in a fantasy world. And I think a lot of people enjoy this because of the main protagonist, and also because this is partly a romance. Her other series, Strange the Dreamer, I think it's called, it's also partly set in the real world, but it's set, I think, in the 1920s, and people seem to like this other series much better. But I just could not get into the other series I read about her, so the Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I just could not connect to the main character. I did not like where the book was heading to, and I just thought that there was so much focus on the character's hair that it was kind of bugging me, and I just could not get into it. So I think Lena Taylor is simply not for me. Then we come to Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff, and I have read this last year towards the end of the year, and I have to admit I really enjoyed it. So this is written in like mixed media format with a lot of interviews and emails and all that kind of jazz and instant messages and so on. And it is a sci-fi book. It's also romance at the same time, and it was so much fun. I was like really adamant in not picking this up and not reading this, because I was reading so many of these young adult fantasy sci-fi books and did not enjoy them, that I was like, no, this is definitely not one I'm gonna pick up. And then one day it was right there at the library just looking at me, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna take it home and then see how it goes. But I think I picked it up because I have read Jay Kristoff's adult fantasy series, the Nevernight Chronicles, and I really loved it. So I was like, if I like his writing style there, I might enjoy this, even though he wrote it with someone else. I highly recommend this if you haven't picked it up yet because you thought it is overhyped. The next book is Sight by Neil Shusterman, and I have read this book and I also read the second book in this series. I have yet to read The Toll, which is the last book in this series, but I don't think I will because overall I'm one of the few, I think, who are disappointed by how this book is and where it went and some of the choices the author and the characters made, I guess, in this book. So it is a really interesting fantasy concept because this is a dystopian, futuristic world where we conquer death. So in order to curb the population growth, this world has sites. They are this organization and these people who actually go and kill people, and they're supposed to do it randomly and in a humane way. And then we follow two characters who are apprentices to sites. And the setup of this novel and this world seem really, really interesting. But as I said, the choices the author made have really took this book to places where I really did not like where it went, and at the same time I really did not like the structure of the book. So basically there's this big plot which is kind of resolved, and that's the one we've been looking forward to all along in this first book, and then this is resolved in a way, and then the book goes on for another like 100-ish pages, and I was like, what's going on? I have read the second book because I think the Thunderhead, because that seemed really interesting. So in this world there's this Thunderhead, which is the AI who kind of runs the world, and this is really a benevolent AI and takes care of everyone. It's almost like God, in this world. And the second book was more about this Thunderhead. But of course, the second book expanded the world, but I just really lost interest. And even though it ended in this huge cliffhanger, I just don't seem to be interested in picking up the last one. And now we come to one of the most controversial young adult fantasy authors on the whole planet, I think. And that is Sarah J. Maas. I think she's one of those authors not a lot of people admit to liking because she's so controversial. And I'm not saying her books are bad or great. I'm just saying, yes, they are problematic, but so are so many others. But they're just so addictive. I think it's in the similar vein to Holly Black and The Cruel Prince. And I'm not saying Sarah J. Maas's book is less or more problematic. I'm just saying they both are. But still, there are people who enjoy them. And I think for me, Sarah J. Maas is also one of those authors I go to when I want to escape and just really immerse myself in a book and maybe not think so much about why is this so smutty if it's young adult and all the problem areas, and there are many, and just enjoy myself. So I have read the Throne of Glass series, and I have also read the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I enjoyed both of them. I see their flaws, but I enjoy reading them, and I'm gonna continue reading her books. I think I haven't read her latest book because it's like an urban fantasy, and I'm not sure I'm ready to go back into urban fantasy just yet. The next book is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, and I have read this book, and I have read the first 3 books in this series. I think there are more coming out, I'm not sure how many. I think this was an interesting book for me because it is a fantasy world inspired by the Roman Empire, so it's very militaristic. But I think this is just one of those where I kind of lost interest on the way, and I just don't really care about what's gonna happen to these characters. I think I'm just gonna DNF this series, I think. Even though I have marked the next installment as a want to read on my Goodreads shelves, but I just don't seem to be interested at all in picking it up. The next author on this list is Seanan Mcguire, and I have to say I haven't read anything by this author yet, but I plan to. I think she's mostly known for the Every Heart a Doorway series, or I don't know what it's called. I think Wayward Children it's called. I think it is really interesting concept. It's a portal fantasy, and there's just so many of these short novellas in this series following different characters. So basically there are these children who go into these worlds, fantasy worlds, and then they come back and they have to deal with the consequence of living again in the normal world, whereas maybe they want to go back to the fantasy world they were in. So I think it's really interesting, and a lot of people seem to like these. A lot of people say that one book is better than the other, but I think that depends on the characters you click with. So because some of these follow completely different characters, so I guess it depends which one you like. But I think I will definitely give this a go, also because they're so short. The next book on this list is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and I think this is one of the better fantasy books I have read in the past year or two. I really enjoyed it. It is Chinese history inspired, but also Chinese myth inspired. So it's like a combination of the two, and it's this really great fantasy world. It starts out in like a school, so if you love school settings, you will probably love this. And then it rapidly turns into really war-focused fantasy, and we follow a main female character. I think it is really interesting and refreshing because it's so different from all the other fantasy out there. And the last one on this list is Jenny Han's To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and I think everyone knows this book or the movie which came out not so long ago, and the second one as well now. And I have read this first book, but I don't think this is really for me. One is a contemporary, and I'm not really into contemporary, or not into young adult contemporary. I read this because it seemed like a cutesy summer book, and I guess I just needed something to zone out with. I really enjoyed it, especially because the main trope in this book, the main romance trope in this book is the fake dating, and I really like that trope. So I really enjoyed the movie. I think I enjoyed it much better than the book. So there are 18 titles and authors on this list, and I have read something or a whole series by 14 of these, which is, I think, a lot. So just to prove how much BookTube influences you. And even though there are many on this list I have not really enjoyed, I think there's still plenty I really liked and I'm planning to continue with. So I think these popular BookTube series authors are kind of hit or miss. But I'm not mad at me trying most of these out and failing at liking them or something like that, you know. I'm happy I did because now I know what the fuss is all about. And considering that there are 4 of these I haven't read, I think 2 of these I'm planning to read. So I'm planning to read The Bone Witch at some point, and I definitely will read something by Seanan Mcguire. So at this point, I think there's only Cassandra Clare and Silvera where I'm just not interested. So what do you think? You think BookTube influences my reading way too much? I definitely think so, but then again, I think I have read most of these books and series when I started watching BookTube, so like 5-6 years ago. And I have read most of these because a lot of these are fantasy, and I was really getting into fantasy at that point. I think now I still read a lot of fantasy, but I'm focusing mostly on adult fantasy books. And I'm not saying I'm not reading any young adult fantasy, because I probably will read those which are really popular and a lot of people talk about it, but I think I'll try to be much more careful in the way I choose them, because I had so much hit or miss with them previously. I think if you watch a lot of BookTube, you end up reading these books because these are the books you recognize when you go to the library or when you go to the bookstore, and then of course you gravitate towards them and pick them up. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.